Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to some new members of our Patreon family: Agnes, Alicia, and Valerie. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting Boring Books for Bedtime and finding out more about the perks available to subscribers, including exclusive episodes, full books, and giveaways found nowhere else, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, in honor of the summer season, when many people take to the road and travel, let's kick off a month of relaxing voyages with more from the Railway Traveler's Handy Book of hints, suggestions, and advice before the journey, on the journey, and after the journey. First published in 1862 by Lockwood & Co., Stationers' Hall Court, London. Let's pick up right where we left off as we learn the complexities of choosing our tickets. Let's begin. Choice of class. The three classes of railway traveling may be said to correspond with the degrees of comparison: positive, comparative, superlative. He who regards economy as of paramount importance, he who aims at combining respectability with moderate charge, or he who is indifferent to cost and studies his comfort only, is duly catered and cared for. At the time when lotteries were in vogue, a person of low estate purchased a ticket. On the day when a list of the prizes was posted up at the lottery office, he proceeded thither to ascertain his fate, and to his great joy and astonishment, beheld the number of his ticket adjudged a £20,000 prize. To calm the agitation of his mind produced by this event, he determined upon taking a walk round St. Paul's, and during that short promenade he settled within himself the manner in which he should expend his newly acquired fortune. His walk ended, he thought he would just go to the lottery office again to feast his eyes on the agreeable announcement. But oh horror! On reading over the list, he found that his ticket was no longer included among the fortunate numbers. In a state of bewilderment bordering on distraction, he entered the lottery office to inquire into the discrepancy. The matter was soon explained. By a slip of the pen, one little figure had been substituted for another, thus entirely altering the context and raising false hopes. The victim of this blunder was often heard to declare that the 10 minutes of ecstasy which he enjoyed under the impression that he was a man of fortune more than compensated for years of actual poverty, and to the day of his death he persisted in declaring he had once been worth £20,000. The relevancy of this anecdote is that the meanest of mankind may, as a railway traveler, taste for once in his life the luxury and ease supposed to be the peculiar privilege of the rich and great, and providing he occupy the compartment alone, he may boast in after life that he once rode in his own carriage. Let us now glance at the comparative cost and comfort of the three classes. The fare of the first class is usually 1/3 more than that of the second class, and double that of the third class. But the superior accommodation is more than commensurate with the excess of fare. The carriage is unexceptionably fitted up, and the occupants polite and well conducted. It is said that a greater amount of respect is accorded to the occupants of first-class carriages than to others. And Punch once presented to his readers a kind of gamut or scale of railway civility, as thus: Collector of tickets to first-class passengers, may I trouble you for your tickets? To second class, tickets please. To third class, now then tickets. We, however, who have always found railway servants uniformly civil and obliging, have no complaint to urge on this score. First-class traveling is undoubtedly most suitable for ladies and for delicate or sickly persons. In the latter case especially, it should be borne in mind that the excess of fare is trifling as compared with the probable doctor's charges consequent upon a cold caught by an invalid journeying in second or third class. Another recommendation of the first class is that the carriages are never overcrowded, and even if they have their complement of passengers, there is still ample sitting room, without any of that crowding, jostling, or edging which are so peculiarly irritating. For the enjoyment of ease and comfort in the highest degree, we would commend the traveler to what are termed the saloon carriages, for in these a person may recline with perfect freedom, and may shift his position as often as he pleases, without incommoding or annoying his fellow traveler. The second-class fare is usually 1/4 less than the first class, but the difference in comfort is immense. The seats and backs of the ordinary second-class carriage are of wood, and the traveling with these surroundings for any length of time is of the most unpleasant description. There is, in point of fact, but little distinction between second and third class, the main difference being in the quality of the company. It is to be observed, however, that on some lines the second-class carriages do not answer to the general description. An attempt is made to render them comfortable, and the seats are partially cushioned. But even this occasional concession would appear to be a matter of caprice, for some trains run the better sort of carriages, while other trains, even on the same line, adhere to the inferior kind. The far-seeing and provident traveler, therefore, will do well if previous to taking his ticket he run his eye along the departing train, and ascertain whether the possibility exists of his having something approximating to first-class comfort at second-class fare. The discomforts and inconveniences of the third class are too notorious to need much dwelling upon. Of course, the lowness of fare is the grand recommendation, but even in this particular, a return journey can be performed at a cheaper rate by second class than by third, inasmuch as return tickets are not generally issued for the latter. Some persons, attracted by the lowness of fare and unacquainted with the attendant drawbacks, have an inclination to ride by third class. Under such circumstances, they may be destined to pass the next few hours of their existence tightly compressed between two rough specimens of humanity. They may be doomed to semi-suffocation, to partial extinction of vision, and total deprivation of motive power by several large bundles, boxes, or baskets, which every other passenger insists upon carrying, and which no amount of force or persuasion can apparently induce them to relinquish. It may be that the shoulders, shins, toes, or other parts of the body will from time to time be brought into contact with angularities or cubes. Let us be understood as not deriding third-class passengers, but as merely pointing out that these little rubs, which are patiently borne by the humbler and more enduring portion of the community, may prove a source of great disquiet and pain to him who is unaccustomed to be thus tried. To sum up the respective merits of the various modes of railway traveling, we should say, let all persons who can afford it travel first class, and let even those who imagine they cannot do so, and who have a long distance to go, expend a few extra shillings in this direction, and economize them in some other. For short journeys, however, the second class may be ridden by without any material sacrifice of comfort, and for very short journeys, where a person wishes to view the country, enjoy the breeze, and indulge in a cigar, the third class will answer the purpose sufficiently well. The assertion may appear a startling one, that a person cannot always travel by the class he would wish, but is compelled, by that regard for appearances which influences society at large, to ride by a dearer class, when his means are better suited to an inferior class. This is an important consideration for persons who are about to take season tickets, and who will in all probability have occasion to travel frequently in company with those with whom they are associated by commercial or social ties, and when to travel by an inferior class would argue either poverty or meanness. Here is a case in point. A London merchant resided a few miles from the city in an elegant mansion, to and from which he journeyed daily and invariably by third class. It happened that one of the clerks in his employ lived in a cottage accessible by the same line of railway, but he always traveled first class, the same train thus presenting the anomaly of the master being in that place which one would naturally assign to the man, and the man appearing to usurp the position of the master. One day, these two alighted at the terminus in full view of each other. "Well," said Mr. B, in that tone of banter which a superior so frequently thinks it becoming to adopt, "I don't know how you manage to ride first class, when in these hard times I find third-class fare as much as I can afford." "Sir," replied the clerk, "you who are known to be a person of wealth and position may adopt the most economical mode of traveling at no worse risk than being thought eccentric, and even with the applause of some for your manifest absence of pride. But as for myself, I cannot afford to indulge in such irregularities. Among the persons I travel with, I am reported to be a well-paid employee and am respected accordingly. To maintain this reputation, I am compelled to travel in the same manner as they do, and were I to adopt an inferior mode, it would be attributed to some serious falling off of income, a circumstance which would occasion me not only loss of consideration among my quondam fellow travelers, but one which, upon coming to the ears of my butcher, baker, and grocer, might seriously injure my credit with those highly respectable but certainly worldly-minded tradesmen. Mr. B. was not slow in recognizing the full force of this argument, more particularly as the question of his own liberality was involved, nor did he hesitate to give it a practical application by immediately increasing the salary of his clerk, not only to the amount of a first-class season ticket, but something over. Choice of carriage. In the selection of his carriage, the railway traveler has to take into consideration both comfort and security. The old stager is fully alive to this, and makes his choice with as much deliberation as an alderman would select his port, his decision being influenced by actual experience as follows. The middle of the train is the safest, because in the event of being run into from behind, or meeting a train in front, the force of the concussion would, in either case, be considerably expended before the center part were reached. The carriages nearest the engine are regarded as dangerous in case of an accident occurring to the engine itself, or in the event of its running off the line, when it usually manages to drag the next 2 or 3 carriages with it. The tail of the train is not liked because it moves, in summertime especially, in a perpetual cloud of dust, which is not calculated to improve the attire or benefit the lungs. The oscillation, jerking, and other eccentric movements of the train are also felt with greater force at the end than in any other portion, and it does sometimes happen that the last carriage or 2, by the severance of the coupling irons, become separated from their traveling companions, and are left standing stock still on the line, while the forward portion of the train speeds on its way, unconscious of and therefore unheeding the catastrophe. Observe that the first-class carriages lined with cloth are warmer than those lined with leather or horsehair. Therefore, in winter, the former are the most comfortable. In summer, the latter are coolest. If you wish to recline at full length and have reason to believe that the carriage will not fill, one having no division of seats may be selected, but under ordinary circumstances, the carriages having divisions are the most comfortable, as they afford a great support to the body when in a sitting position, and effectually prevent persons monopolizing an undue share of space. If there are 2 kinds of second-class carriages, the one having ample window room, and the other with a small opening on each side resembling portholes, avoid the latter as you would the plague, especially if the weather be hot, unless you wish to realize to yourself what the terrible position might have been of those unfortunate occupants of the Black Hole of Calcutta. When you are going on a long journey, bring the principles of Lavater to your aid, and scan the features of the persons already in possession of the carriage, with a view of ascertaining whether they are likely to prove pleasant traveling companions or the contrary. Life is so short that even a few hours miserably or happily spent are objects of consequence. Do not select a carriage which is obviously already in the possession of a party. The forming one too many is anything but agreeable. A conversation carried on across you and behind you, and upon topics in which you are in no way concerned, is apt to prove uninteresting. Then there is that system of private telegraphing from one to the other, which might be interpreted thus: "What a nuisance this man coming in our carriage. If he had any sense, he might have known that he wasn't wanted here. Did you ever see such a guy? I wonder who and what he is," and so on. So if a party wish to travel in perfect comfort and to keep together, they should engage a carriage for their exclusive occupation. And this might be done by sending word to the station master a day or two previously, and to ensure attention, forwarding at the same time the amount of fare. Choice of seat. The most comfortable seat in a railway carriage is a corner one, and if you desire to be undisturbed and at the same time to have an opportunity of viewing the country, the corner furthest from the door at which the passengers enter is the best. If, however, you have not far to go, or wish to witness the bustle and commotion of the platform, then take up your station at the corner nearest the entrance door. It is generally acknowledged that sitting with the back to the engine prevents the motion of the carriage being felt in a great degree, but to some persons this makes no difference. Certainly, in sitting with the back towards the engine, one escapes the dust and ashes which are constantly flying about. The center compartment of a first-class carriage is said to be safest in the event of a collision, because this portion of the carriage is more substantially built, and consequently better calculated to resist the shock. In second and third class carriages, avoid sitting near the doorway. The constant opening and shutting of the door subject those near it to cold and draughts, and the incessant passing to and fro, with the usual accompaniments of shoulder grasping and toe crushing, is more than sufficient to test the best of tempers. It also frequently happens that one of the passengers, a navvy for instance, is ever and anon thrusting his head out the window, thus favoring you with an uninterrupted view of his substantial but by no means picturesque proportions. Sending females and children by railway unaccompanied. It frequently happens that a female is compelled to undertake a journey by railway unaccompanied. She can generally contrive, however, to secure the services of her husband, brother, or other male relative to see her off by the train, and as the departure is the most harassing part of the journey, she will then not have much to dread. In such a case, we would advise the person who has charge of the lady to put her into a carriage where there are others of her own sex, especially those of matronly appearance and with family surroundings. They might be asked in a respectful manner if they were going as far as the unaccompanied female. Any woman of ordinary shrewdness and kindly feeling would understand the question, and determine within her own mind to extend the required protection. But a person of tact could manage this matter in a better way. he might enter into conversation with the ladies, and incidentally mention that her companion was compelled to travel alone. Then, after a few other remarks, he might claim their protection, and having thus established a sort of introduction, leave the future fellow travelers to improve the occasion. If a female is obliged not only to travel alone, but to go to the station alone, she should place herself under the care of one of the policemen or guards, of whom she will find many, and he will see her luggage stowed away, assist her in procuring a ticket, in selecting a seat, etc. In some extreme cases, it is necessary to send a child of tender years by railway without a protector. There was an account in the newspaper some time since of a little boy, 7 years of age, being dispatched alone from York to London. A label inscribed with his name and address and destination was attached to his clothes, with no further direction than that he was to wait at the terminus till called for. The account goes on to state that this strange living package was conveyed with care, and that he arrived at the place to which he was sent in perfect safety. We do not altogether advocate such a mode of dispatch as this, but we would advise a person having to send a child unaccompanied by railway to place him in a carriage where there is a family party, so that he will stand a chance not only of being protected, but amused in company with those of his own age. Under any circumstances, the bare mention of such a fact to even the most inexorable of bachelors would prove a sufficient claim on his sympathies and induce him to treat his little traveling companion with kindness and consideration. The attention of the guard might be also drawn to the circumstance, who would see every now and then how Master Half-Price was getting on, and thus the journey would be accomplished in safety. Retaining your seat. So soon as the railway traveler is admitted to the platform, he should hasten to the train drawn alongside, and having first ascertained that it is the train he is to proceed by, at once select his carriage and seat according to the hints previously given. If he have companions, then the choice must be made with a view to the comfort of all, and if he has only himself to please, the task is extremely simple. There is a certain etiquette in connection with the retaining of seats, which it is considered both rude and unjust to disregard. Thus, the placing of a coat, a book, a newspaper, or any other article on the seat of a carriage is intended as a token that such place is engaged. This principle is to be acted on in the retaining of seats, and whatever the number you require should have deposited conspicuously upon them anything that comes to hand. This system of occupation by proxy refers, however, more especially to the first class. With the majority of travelers by second and third class, this delicate intimation does not appear to be understood, or if understood, not recognized. In such cases, it would be necessary to place some article of size and bulk in the place where you wish to sit, as a portmanteau or box, which some persons would be too timid and others too idle to remove. But where there is a party of some 3 or 4, one of the company should see after the luggage and tickets, while the others sit wide and thus retain between them a seat for their absent companion. If a person finds that he will not be able to arrive at the station until the very last moment, he should send his servant or someone upon whom he could depend to procure the ticket, retain the seat, etc. And if he have any business to transact, such as the posting of the railway accident insurance ticket, he should retain his seat at the earliest possible moment to afford ample time for the performance. Under any circumstances, the number of the carriage and its position should be noted. Otherwise, and especially if the gage de séance has been removed or accidentally displaced, the unseated member will be rushing from carriage to carriage in a state of bewilderment, and will be at last compelled to settle down anywhere, and take the chance of regaining his missing articles either during or at the close of the journey. Supposing you to have companions in the waiting room, you will, after having selected seats for them, hasten to where you have left them and escort them to the train. And this being off your mind, you will be enabled to see to the stowing away of the luggage, if this be not already done, or to perform any other office you desire. Occasionally, an ill-bred person is to be met with, who will unceremoniously remove articles from a seat, disputing the right of preoccupation, and appropriating the coveted place to himself. Such person should be mildly remonstrated with, and if this fail, then an appeal should be made to the station master or the guard, who will possibly be able to prevail upon the usurper to abdicate. But if he still persists in holding out, avoid anything like collision, an ominous term on railways. Leave him to triumph in an ungentlemanly action, and seek a place in some other portion of the train. We hold that altercations under such circumstances are not only useless, but unpleasant in their results. Here is an example. "Excuse me, sir, but you have taken my seat." "Your seat, sir? Nothing of the kind. Possession is 9 points of the law, and you see I have it." "But, sir, I placed my traveling bag upon the seat 10 minutes since." "And supposing you did, what then?" "What then? Why, sir, you surely cannot be ignorant of the custom among railway travelers of securing seats by depositing articles upon them." "I recognize no such custom. When I find a seat with nobody on it, I take it. I have taken this, and I mean to keep it." "Well, sir, all I can say is that you are no gentleman." "Perhaps not, sir, and on that account I should advise you to be civil." "What, sir, do you dare to threaten me?" "What do you mean?" "Pooh-pooh, don't bother me. Go away and sit down. But I'll let you know, sir, that—" At this moment, the familiar face of the guard appears at the carriage window. The door is closed, the whistle is blown, and the train starts. The claimant of the appropriated seat is obliged to find another where best he can, and the antagonists perform the journey either in open conflict by talking at each other, or by silently looking daggers drawn, to the amusement, the annoyance, or both of the other passengers, but to the decided chagrin, humiliation, and discomfort of him who has been worsted in the contest. We may perhaps be allowed to put in a word in favor of this custom of retaining seats. We consider, then, that there is nothing unfair in it, inasmuch as the opportunity is open to all, and on the universally recognized principle of first come, first served. The earliest comers at a station are certainly entitled to a choice of places. The book, the bag, the newspaper, or other representative article ought to be respected, for this shows, or at least in 9 instances out of 10, that the person himself has been there, and it is somewhat exacting on the part of others to require a traveler to coop himself up in a close station a quarter of an hour previous to starting, in order that he may the more effectually defend his right against ill-bred and wrong-headed pretenders. When a train passes through the station from which the railway traveler departs, it is obviously impossible for him to retain a seat, unless some sort of influence be brought to bear upon the station master or the guard in charge of the train, or the good offices of some friend or acquaintance at the starting point are put into requisition. Nevertheless, we would advise the intending traveler to take up his station on the platform, in such a position as will enable him to observe the interior of the carriages as they flit by him, so that when the train pulls up, he will be enabled, if not to fix upon a particular seat, at least to select a carriage that is not overcrowded, or the occupants of which appear most congenial to his desires. We also suggest that a person thus waiting for a train to pass through should post himself on the platform a few yards in advance of the station and not absolutely within it, for it is here that the crowd mostly congregate, and from this point a certain amount of squeezing and hustling is brought to bear, which it is as well to avoid. Also, generally speaking, the engine and foremost portion of the train shoots beyond the station, so that a person placed as we have indicated may take his seat leisurely and quietly in a half-filled carriage, while persons lower down are struggling to possess the vacant seats of carriages already overcrowded. Procuring your ticket. The place where the tickets are issued is usually not open until within about a quarter of an hour of the departure of the train. Supposing, therefore, a passenger to have arrived at the station previously, he can employ the interval in looking after his luggage, selecting his seat, etc., and thus have nothing to attend to but the procuring his ticket. This process is usually so well managed that there is little crowding or confusion, each person taking his turn in regular order. In this comparatively trifling matter, as in every other, there is a right way and a wrong way of proceeding. All preliminary words are not only a waste of time, but quite unnecessary. The clerk sits at the counter for the purpose of ascertaining the place you are bound for, the class you wish to travel by, and the nature of the journey, whether single or double. The readiest way, therefore, of making yourself understood is to apply for your ticket somewhat after this manner: Bath, first class, return, or whatever it may be. We have previously alluded to the necessity of having a supply of change, and this applies with especial force to the procuring of the ticket. If you know what the fare is, have the exact amount ready in your hand, and if you do not know it, have the money so handy that you may make up the sum without hesitation. By doing this, you will not only save your own time, but that of your neighbor. Perhaps some of our readers may be able to call to mind some such scene as the following, which is indeed one of the incidents of almost every departing train. An elderly lady presents herself at the ticket counter and expresses a wish to go to some place at a short distance, say Putney. She first of all inquires what is the fare, first, second, and third class. Upon being told that, she hesitates a few seconds and then thinks she will travel first class. Being asked whether she requires a single or return ticket, she appears to be astounded at the proposition, says at wide intervals, and finally decides upon a single ticket, giving at the same time her reasons for doing so. Having been informed that the fare is 9 pence, she dives for her purse into some apparently unfathomable chasm connected with her dress, and after considerable rummaging, accompanied by a jingling of keys and the production in succession of a pocket handkerchief, smelling bottle, a pair of mittens, spectacle case, a fan, and an Abernethy biscuit, she at length succeeds in drawing forth an article which resembles an attenuated eel. Thrusting her long, bony fingers into this receptacle, she draws out what she conceives to be a shilling, but on nearer inspection she discovers it to be a sovereign. She makes another dive and produces a half-crown, as she supposes, but this proves to be only a penny piece. Finally, she manages to fish out 6 pence, and connecting this with the penny piece, and vaguely wondering whether she can find 2 pence more to make up the required amount, but without arriving at any satisfactory conclusion, she is at length constrained to give over further search and to lay down the sovereign. Upon receiving her change, she examines each piece leisurely to ascertain if it be genuine. Satisfied on this point, she counts her change over, repeating the process some 4 or 5 times, and on each occasion arriving at a different result. At length she makes out the matter to her satisfaction. Then, having carefully stowed away her change in such a manner that the first pickpocket may abstract it, she looks about her to see that she has left nothing behind, and after remarking how wonderfully the clerk resembles her nephew who has gone to the Indies, she somewhat reluctantly makes way for the next person. This is no overcharged picture, and we have no doubt that every one of our readers has in his time had his patience tried by some obstructive old lady bound for Putney or elsewhere. When you have received your ticket, put it in some place where it is not likely to be disturbed, but where it may be readily lighted on. If you deposit it in a pocket with other articles, the chances are that in withdrawing any of these, the ticket may bear them company and so be lost. This is a serious affair, since the ticket is a voucher that the traveler has paid his fare, and its non-production at the end of the journey entails the necessity of paying a second time. When you receive your ticket, ascertain that it is correct as regards the place you have booked for, the class you wish to travel by, and whether it be single or return. Any error of this kind discovered immediately is soon rectified, but if allowed to pass, it cannot be so easily remedied afterwards, if at all. Elderly or infirm persons, to avoid the inconvenience attending the procuring of the ticket, should ask one of the porters to perform that office for them, or prevail upon some person to obtain the ticket at the same time they do their own. When there are several persons belonging to the same party, one person will be sufficient to secure the tickets for the whole. Children under 12 years of age travel at half price. When an adult therefore takes a ticket for himself and child, he asks for a ticket and a half for every additional child under the limited age, calculating a half ticket. Persons should be cautioned not to tamper with the tickets in any way, and especially not to make use of or purchase passes which are not transferable. The detection of these irregularities is productive of the most awkward and humiliating consequences. Signal for starting. About 5 minutes before a train starts, a bell is rung as a signal to the passengers to prepare for starting. Persons unaccustomed to travel by railway connect the ringing of the bell with the instant departure of the train. And it is most amusing to watch the novices running helter-skelter along the platform, tumbling over everything and everybody in their eagerness to catch the train which they believe is about to go without them. At the same time, the seasoned traveler, who understands the intention of the bell, stands by the carriage door coolly surveying the panic-stricken multitude, or walks leisurely along the platform with the consciousness of being in ample time. The signal for the actual starting of the train is a whistle sounded by the guard, and when that is heard, the journey commences in earnest. And with that, we have reached the end of our preparations before the journey, which seems as good a place as any to end this evening's reading from the Railway Traveler's Handy Book, which once again has supplied us with excruciating detail about getting on a train. But given that trains were quite a new thing at the time, I imagine that detail was quite helpful. Next time, we'll learn the etiquette for actually riding on a train, so that's something to look forward to. If you'd like to read this work for yourself, as always, you'll find a link in the show description. This time, it will connect you to the Internet Archive, where you can download a PDF of this book. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, you can drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.